the situation of that organization or that part of the organization. In general, Hoshin Kanri assumes that as I cascade goals down through the organization and I play catch ball with somebody, they're skilled at catching the ball. There's no point in throwing the ball at somebody who doesn't know how to catch and it hits them in the head and gives them a concussion. So they have to have the skill, and the skill they have to have is the problem-solving process. And therefore, in that sense, I would say they have to become strong at turning that goal into action that through PDCA will get them closer to the target before you can start firing targets at them that are meaningful. And if there's one part of the organization that's gotten that skill, but most of the organization doesn't have it, then Hoshin Kanri becomes really management by objectives. It becomes top-down, give me this or else, and then becomes a checklist game. So the reason we put Hoshin Kanri fourth is because there's some level of skill needed in how to improve in steps 1 through 3 before you can get to the point of completely aligning the organization effectively using Hoshin Kanri.
All right, Brian, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, George, I had one, and Dr. Laker. I think we're probably in the initial stages. As a matter of fact, I know we are. So what are is there a quick way or a quicker way, or what's the best way to commit to the self-development?
Well, first of all, everybody needs a coach. Now, your goal should be to become a coach. And all of us are always in the self-development stage, and we're always in the coaching stage where we should be doing all these things at whatever level of maturity we're at. But whatever level we're at, we should always be trying to improve ourselves, Kaizen ourselves. But if you have spent most of your career in a traditional organization that's running by the numbers, and you're more managers than leaders, and you're not at the Gemba, and you're not sort of trained in how to develop standards that are effective and engage people, you have to learn that. So you need a coach from somewhere, whether it's inside the company or hiring somebody from outside. And there's different coaches with different philosophies. For example, I mentioned Mike Rother, and I'll talk about this more in the problem-solving chapter, but I talked about the improvement kata and the coaching kata, which are very defined, structured methods for learning how to improve by doing something every day and having very clear structure and practice routines, very clear things to practice, and then the coach having a very clear structure for guiding your practice. So that's very, very highly structured and developed. And then you have something like A3 teaching that John Shook writes about in Managing to Learn, which is the way you develop, say, a 3-month improvement project, and you have a coach, and they're checking every step of the process. Did you define the problem right? Do you understand the root cause? Do you understand the gaps, even before the root cause? Do you understand the most important gaps that you intend to work on? And you have to explicitly define every step before you can go to the next step. And again, you need a coach to judge whether you're on track or not, whether you're following a good process or not, whether you have involved the right people effectively, whether you engage people correctly. So without a coach, it's very difficult to self-develop. And self-develop doesn't mean like a self-help guide, like I get the book on how to finish my basement, or I get the book on how to cook a fine meal, and without anybody teaching me, I just figure it out for myself. It doesn't mean you have to figure it out for yourself. You do need a coach of some sort, and then you need to practice. And I find that when we've worked with companies and they say, I've read your books, Dr. Liker, it's really how we modeled our company, and then we begin working with them, there's huge gaps between their intellectual understanding and what they have the skill to do in practice. And the only way to close that gap is through practice, like anything else. Practice with a coach.
Jeff, thank you. When somebody throws in a question twice, I got to ask it. and then I'll go back to Steve. So this is Thanasi Kanalakis. I think he's Greek, Jeff. So for a company that is new to lean, yeah, one of us. For a company that is new to lean and not yet committed to it, what short-term negatives need to be addressed up front in setting expectations in the business case?
I personally, I take the same perspective as John Shook and Mike Rother, where your first real goal is to begin to develop the leadership. Now, the way the Toyota folks do that is always through a first project. They pick something in the company to improve, and they sometimes call it a model line or model product family. So they pick something to work on, and they go through the whole problem-solving process. Okay, what's our vision? Why we have that vision? What is the current situation? Do we really understand it? What are the gaps? What are we going to focus first on for improving? How can we run experiments and try and test out our ideas and start the PDCA cycles? So they will do that. In the Toyota case, they won't use the language of Mike Rother of Toyota Kata. They won't even teach A3. They'll just go to the Gemba and just start working. But they don't want to work on an end-to-end value stream. They don't want to work on business objectives of the company. They want to pick the machining process or the assembly process or the sales process or the process of making a bid with a customer. They want to pick a defined process, and they want to lead a team through that with the senior management supporting it and at least watching closely and being closely involved, if not leading it. And they want to also develop some internal coaches. So they'll have some people who are going to become the lean coaches who are part of that initial project. So this first project is strictly for learning's sake. Then when you have some people who now have some understanding, then we can expand to another project or another value stream or another department. And that all happens usually over about the first year or so of just being very focused in small areas for the sake of learning, like a study group. Then you can sit back and say, what have we learned? How much time does it take to develop this capability in people so that we have something sustainable? And how many coaches do we have? And where do we want to go next? And what is our capacity for spreading this? So you can have an educated discussion about the next plan for the next plan, big plan to check X cycle. The problem is when you're starting out, you don't know enough. You haven't tested enough. You haven't tried enough to know how far you can go. And then you get into the trap of what I call 1 inch deep and a mile wide, which is we sprinkle lean dust every place, and we end up with pretty pictures and value stream maps and 5S. And at some point I'd done work with Ford. One of the first big projects was the Ford production system. And then we discovered that the shop floor workers actually thought FPS stood for fresh paint smell. Because that's what they associated. We're painting everything, colors. And that's lean. So you have to start in a focused area developing some capability first.
The follow-on question here by Tom is, do you see a hit to the short-term profitability of companies just beginning lean?
Again, if you take the approach that I'm talking about, where you start in focused areas, there's no reason why it should affect your profitability. The bad news is that I can do a fabulous job in this one area, and it may not affect the profitability positively because it's too small a part of the company. The good news is that if I do something bad, it's not going to damage the profitability because it's also not big enough. So if I were to have a massive lean effort in year one where I'm trying to change everything at once, and I'm giving all new targets and all new marching orders for how to behave, and I totally disrupt the company, then I could harm profitability. But if I'm focusing on a certain area, and if I do this right, the good news is that our experience is a really good plan, do, check, act process with really clear targets, and people who are being well coached will, in almost 100% of the cases, achieve the objective. So we almost could be guaranteed, if we do this right, that we're going to improve whatever we're working on, and that part of the business will contribute more to profitability. So there really should not be a hit to profitability, but you may not get a big improvement in profitability for the first year or two.
All right, thank you. For everybody that has to go, we understand, but we're going to stay behind. I think, Jeff, you're going to take a few more questions, aren't you?
Yep.
Okay, good. Steve, get ready. And for those that have to leave, you can get a video recording of this in the online office. I'll send you an email later. Brian seems to have a question. I'll take him off, so we'll bypass Steve here. Brian, go ahead.
No, actually, we're gonna go ahead and log off and have a discussion here.
Yeah, good job, Brian. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you, George. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Okay, see you next month.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
George, I have about probably 10 to 15 questions that have come over on question and answer. So I don't know if you're going to have enough time to answer all of them. So how do we go about answering these questions?
Yeah, what we do is, let Jeff answer whatever he's able to say I'm comfortable with. And then ultimately, Jeff will say, I got to go. And then we'll field the rest of the questions ourselves. If we need Jeff's help, we'll ask for it.
So any way you can prioritize or group together questions that are related would help.
Let's see. There's a lot of, for our information, George, there was a lot of I can't hear you to begin with through the process, probably about a dozen people. So they want to know where they can get a hold of the video later on.
That's an easy one. George, why don't you tell them that?
Yep. How does Lean work?
I'll send him an email, Jeff.
Okay.
How models like Baldridge and EFQM?
I'm tempted to say it doesn't, but that's a little bit of an oversimplification. I will give one example of a hospital where I happen to know an excellent lean leader who runs a part of the hospital, and he actually took on doing continuous improvement, leading continuous improvement, developing himself for his part of the hospital. He was the vice president of the part, without support from the rest of the hospital. The rest of the hospital had a very mechanistic view of improvement. It was mostly driven out of the quality department, and they were basically making rules and saying, follow my rules. And he was engaging, empowering people, continuously improving, creating flow, reducing time to serve the customer. He was doing fabulously. They applied for the Baldridge Award, and even though he kind of felt alienated, like the rest of the hospital doesn't support what he's doing, they held his group up as the best example. And mainly because of his efforts, the hospital won the Baldridge Award. Now, his view when they were being examined by the Baldridge examiners was that the worst thing that can happen to our hospital is we win the Baldridge Award, because we're not ready and we don't deserve it. But his fear was that the Baldridge examiners wouldn't be able to see deep enough into the organization to see the difference between the official report and the reality. They wouldn't be at the gamba enough. And he was right. The hospital won the Baldridge Award. They then could relax, and then they stopped improving. So in that sense, for them, it was something negative. And I know that there's organizations that have really worked hard to improve using the Baldridge criteria. And their view was that winning the Baldridge Award was just one step on their journey, and they just kept on improving beyond that. So it's a good model, and a learning organization that's very healthy can use it effectively, but an organization that's sort of stuck as a not learning bureaucracy will use it just as a way to advertise how good they are, and they'll fool themselves in thinking that they're better than they are. And my experience is that these examiners can't get deep enough into the organization to see the reality.
Okay, next question. This will be a good one for you, Jeff. How do you sustain momentum with lean?
I think the problem with that question often is that we're thinking about it at too high a level. Coach for a 5,000 person company, and I'm going around doing projects, and I would like whatever we come up with in the time I'm there to just sustain itself and keep growing even when I'm not there. And that's not very realistic. What we want to, the question should be, how do we teach leaders, how do we develop leaders to the point that they can improve and sustain improvement within their area of responsibility. And that's a result of developing the leaders. A well-developed leader can do that. But generally, when things are not sustaining, the leaders are not well-developed. And they're doing what some expert is telling them to do. They're following some company program, and they're doing it in a checklist sort of way without really understanding the purpose, without being passionate about the purpose, without having the energy to really drive it and lead it, or they don't have leadership skills and nobody's really coaching them.
Okay, this might be a follow-on. How do you respond to feedback from leaders who view some of this as micromanaging people?
Well, another thing that I've observed is that if I have 100 leaders reporting up to me, or if I have 10 leaders reporting up to me, let's say 10, and I'm trying to now develop these 10 leaders toward this image I now have of what they should be doing, and I believe that I need to be with them to coach them, and 2 of the 10 leaders feel like I'm micromanaging them, then I feel like a failure, and I'm concerned about that. It bothers me, and I'm obsessed about those 2 leaders. What I should be is I should be focusing on the 8 leaders who want to be coached, or I should ask myself, am I doing a good job coaching? Maybe I am micromanaging. Because to me, the difference between coaching and micromanaging is that if I'm there at the Gemba and I help you to better do your job, I help you to learn, I empower you, I break down some barriers that you have because you don't have the authority I have, then generally you're going to see me as somebody you want to have around. But if I'm just asking you a bunch of questions and checking up on you and I don't have a lot to offer because I haven't developed my skills enough, then it appears that I'm micromanaging. So it could be the coaching style, or it could be that when you're early on in this process, even if you're a great coach, there's some people who will realize that they're benefiting from your coaching, and there's other people who won't. What I would do is focus on the people who want to self-develop and see the value in your coaching so that they can start to become role models for those who are resisting. And then you'll get peer pressure as well. So you think about this long term, you don't need 10 people to all be on board in lockstep. Even if 1 or 2 people are strong, work with those people, then work with the next 2 people, then the next 2 people, and continue to talk to the people resisting, not forcing them into anything, but just to get to know them and build a relationship.
Okay, how do you feel about the measurement aspect of Six Sigma as compared to the PDCA cycle?
I think that Six Sigma, good Six Sigma, is the PDCA cycle. So if you look at DMAIC, the first 3 steps are plan, and then you implement something, you do something, and then what is called control should really be check and act. Now, if I've seen people that learn Six Sigma in some sort of course, or maybe from Master Black Belt, but they learn Six Sigma in a way where the most important work they do is the define, measure, analyze. And they feel that if we define, measure, analyze to the nth detail with the right statistical distribution with perfectly accurate data, then we will know what to fix. And then we'll implement it relatively quickly, and then we just control what we've implemented. And they don't see it really as a learning process. Now, if you take, say, Mike Rother's improvement kata, it's exactly the opposite, where there's some you plan, but most of the planning is observing at the Gemba what's really happening. It's identifying your next target condition for the next 2 weeks. You PDCA your way to that, then you develop your next target condition, then you PDCA your way to that. So you're learning step by step, iteratively toward a target. And you're not assuming that you can solve all the problems in the first 3 stages. So my feeling is that that often there's too much emphasis on analysis of data in Six Sigma and not enough analysis of experimenting at the Gemba, reflecting people in that department. Now, for some very technical problems, like we need to set up the chemical process and get exactly the right balance of chemicals and make sure that the machines are capable and there's interactions between different variables, then for that, you're basically doing an engineering project and following, doing a lot of analysis may well be what's most important. But for the most of the problems we solve, most of the improvements we make in how we do our work, I think I would like to see more emphasis on experimenting at the Gemba with the people and less emphasis on upfront measurement and analysis.
Okay. A problem can be a threat to customer satisfaction. In my company, it often leads to firefighting. What is the key to restore the PDCA cycle?
Well, as I showed that model of problem surfacing, because they surface all the time, and then you need a way of prioritizing and then going through PDCA. Now, what I didn't say, and I think what sometimes is taken for granted by people who work for Toyota or study Toyota system, is the role of containment. That when you first have a quality problem that might get through to your customer, your first priority is contain the problem. Don't allow it to get through the system all the way to the customer. Or if it's not the customer, take immediate action to recover. And that means might mean going to the customer and fixing the problem or giving them a replacement or something. But you have to take some immediate action to contain the problem. And then once it's contained, then you have to decide, is this what I'm going to spend my time? How much time, effort, and effort will I spend on solving this problem at the root cause? Because I've got 300 other problems. So you have to have a way of prioritizing. But you never just ignore a safety or quality problem. You have to contain, and containment is really a type of firefighting. It's temporary until I have the time to go back and really do root cause analysis and solve the problem.
Thanks, Jeff. Steve, we can't hear you.
I think, yeah, I was just looking through the questions. I think that's probably basically it, Jeff. I think you've answered it through the additional information you gave to the previous questions.
Great, thanks. And also, this is just the first week, and we're going to have a whole chapter on problem solving and visual management. So all these issues are going to be discussed in detail when we reach that chapter. Appreciate your time and participation, and hope this is worthwhile, and hope we can, as many of you will stay with me and with us through the whole book. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Take care, and I'll